My name is David Fellah. Shift. My name is David Fellah. I'm the co-founder of Strategic Design Group, which is a 100-people design outfit here in Copenhagen and in Denmark altogether, where we work with everything that's next. I'm also a former CEO and a co-founder of a company called Designed, a global strategic design consultancy of 600 people today. More than that, I'm also an early investor along with my partners in Designed and an early designer in Tradeshift already back. When was this? 10 years ago, exactly. The first 3,000 hours of design, at least, that was delivered into the building of Tradeshift was delivered by us and our people. And I'm saying this so that you know that design is really, and designing for change is really at the core of Tradeshift and the Tradeshift thinking. And I believe that is why it makes sense for me to be here today. I'm here to talk about design and how important design for change is. How important design for change is for all aspects of business, and I mean all aspects of business, and in most, today at least, in most aspects of life in general. And how important it is that we connect life and business through design. Also, even though you guys are probably sitting there thinking, so we are supply chain professionals, I've been taught that's what it's called, right? Yeah? How does that actually apply to me, and how does that mean in my everyday work? And I'm hoping that by the end of this little talk, you'll know, yeah, maybe we can make a change with the solutions that we are working with also. But how it all connects business and life through design, if we understand that, we also understand what designing for change is. First we need to agree on something. That's not going to be difficult after what Christian just said, that the world is changing fast. You may think this is a cliche, or we already know that, but you don't know that. You think you know that the world is changing. We are speed blind with how fast the world is changing right now. Systems change really, really fast. The way systems connect with each other develop even faster. Demographics, the way we see and understand people and the way people interact with each other is also changing faster than ever before. User dynamics, everything is changing fast. And because of that, expectations are changing fast. Cliche, you'd say, we know that. You don't know that. We are speed blind. The new normal, we think, is always like, probably the world is going to be like this in a few years from now. People who think about this and research about this, they say that the transformation we're going to see over the course of the next 10 years, and hence the impact on the lives that we live, is going to be as transformational as the entire last century. That's 100 years worth of transformation in just 10 years. That's going to be crazy. And it's happening all around us as we are sitting right here. And if you think of it, actually, the last 20 years, we've seen almost as much change, as much transformation as in the previous 100 years. But dig into it and dive into it if you feel like maybe challenging me on that one. But the world is changing. The age of everything static is absolutely long gone. And navigating this landscape of constant change calls for adaptive strategies for just about everything that we do. Adaptive is the one way forward. So how do we do that? In my world and the view that I have and how we at least help businesses where I come from, understanding design thinking is how. So I'm a consultant. And this is a part of our manifesto I'm not going to try to sell us or anything like that for you, but it is at the core of what we think. That adaptive design thinking must be at the core of every business interactions, and I believe that you guys are in charge of a lot of business interactions. The predictable customer journey, one would know where do companies and interactions meet clients. Can you hear me with this one? It seems to be dropping out a bit. Breaks into 1,000 abrupt but super meaningful interactions. We'll dig into that a little later. Brands and organizations, they need to become agile, super adaptable, and in order to be that, you need to start knowing what design thinking is. Devices and products and services and interactions will connect like we've never seen these things connect before. Companies, anywhere where you have interaction between brands, organizations, customers, users, etc., we need to change to becoming an outside-in driven dynamic. Okay, to understand that, first we need to do away with the classic perception of design. You're in Copenhagen, we are, as you say, a design-centered city in so many ways, a design-centered culture in so many ways. But the classic idea of what design is probably what you guys have sort of with you, and I'm trying to kill that right now. Classic idea is that you see a complex problem, you come up with a feasible solution, which is something that we know can be done. Engineers say, yes, this is actually doable, let's do it right away, and then you make it look great. And that's how we all usually think of design. That is born out of an engineering tradition. Actually, this is how engineers work. I love engineers, so there's nothing wrong with engineers or engineering thinking in any way. But there's parts of that process that stands in the way of being adaptable, of wanting to change things fast. The adaptive design thinking process, though, is something slightly different. You see a complex problem, same old, but then you analyze context. You uncover opportunities, you frame ideation processes, you generate solutions, you test and evaluate those prototypes, then you go back again. And this is where I believe what Christian says, that people are going to get a little pissed with you, because that process is iterative and it's constantly ongoing, and it will deliver a whole different kind of solutions there. And how wide that context is that you work with, and how is something that is what designs and sort of defines what opportunities you'll uncover. And in order to know how wide this context is that you should work with or can work with this, I've brought with me 5 currents that we in our organization work with, understanding the context of users and companies and brands right now. I'll get into that a little later. And actually, that would be the most important part of this talk. And then, of course, you also make it look great. We are in Copenhagen. This is born out of an explorative and experimental mindset. So design thinking is somewhat the opposite of engineering. And you're in Denmark, which is, as I said, the cradle of user-centric design. So let's use this as a somewhat simple perspective to understanding designing for change and design thinking all in general. This is a chair. I couldn't help noticing that all this is actually not just a chair. This is the chair. The chair is called the chair, and it's by one of our most fantastic and famous furniture designers called Wiener. It's 60 to 70 years old, I'm not entirely sure, and I couldn't help noticing that all the breakout rooms are named after Danish furniture, right? Yeah, that's really nice. You look at this chair and say, that's a beautiful chair, and look at that craftsmanship, and they're being produced in the thousands every month, so it's probably also super well engineered, and that's probably why it looks so beautiful, but it's not. This chair looked beautiful back in the 60s when Kennedy used it. Also, it looked beautiful when Obama used it just a few years ago. And this chair is beautiful, and it's a success not because of the engineering behind it, but because this chair is, which probably is the opposite of what you think, is designed to fit a human being's anatomy, the way we use a chair, and the way that we sort of talk about chairs, interact with chairs. It sounds a little weird, but it's true. That is what has defined the shape of this chair. Form follows function, which is what we work with around here, and that is what defines the beauty of this chair. This is the Scandinavian mindset when it comes to all these things. This is another example, and I really love this example. You all remember this thing, the Segway? Have you probably all seen it all together? It was made to be an urban transportation revolution. It was mind-blowing when it came out 20 years ago. A massive engineering feat. Just imagine that this was even possible. A self-balancing individual transportation thingy. It was engineered because it was possible, and it was not a success. Why wasn't it a success? Because nobody in that whole fantastic process that was funded by I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars back then asked the question, do users really want one of these things? The price point and the way you look when you're on these things, does it make sense to have a product like that? And it didn't. They sold 100,000 of these over the first probably more or less 20 years that they've been into existence. Then they were sold to a Chinese company called Ninebot, by the way, who sort of took the brand and turned it into this. An electric kick scooter is what it's called, electric kick scooter, which has been a true urban transportation revolution. Now, I don't know where you guys are from, but you'll be walking around in Copenhagen now. You'll see thousands of these things. Probably you do that in many cities around the world right now. Thousands of these things, and they are definitely transforming urban transportation. These things are a success out there in a whole different way. Ninebot, or Segway as they're called now, sold 1 million of these in the first 1 year that they made them, as opposed to 100,000 of the other Segways in the first 20 years, because this has the right price point. This, you still look a little dorky on them, but it doesn't matter because it's only it's a small thing. It's not a thing that sort of defines your entire being as a human being, as it would be if you bought a Segway and it was like, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 or something like that. So I think that's really interesting. This is designed for a certain purpose. There's a market for it, and there's people has been asked in a way if this made sense for them, and it did. So this is a success, while the engineered solution didn't really work. Okay, enough about that. We're talking about designing for change. Designing for change can be defined in so many ways. There's a great need for defining it in so many ways that people do understand it, and that all of us who have an impact on the world, and most businesses do have a great impact on the world. Around where I come from, we say that what people and organizations and companies do to change their services and products to improve the world we live in and the lives that we live in this world. Be it massive solutions, you all know these big solutions that are changing the way that we travel or find places to stay, find friends or dates, all these things, or just the way that I receive and understand and pay my invoices, the way that I feel safe in the systems that I interact with. And as all systems, almost all interactions with businesses become digital, it has never been more important that these systems also convey a certain feeling of safety. Any of you as parents, the age of my parents, will know that that is a big thing. But designing for the sake of change doesn't change a thing. We must design change that matters. In order to do that, we need to understand what actually matters out there. And so I brought those 5 currents that we currently work with that we think make a lot of sense. Right now, we're seeing the next wave of disruption, and how do we ride that? We are definitely talking about constant change also. The first wave of disruption, which is what we all know, was changing from analog to digital. Most of you guys are involved with that, going paperless. Moving from analog to digital is probably sort of at the core of what you are here for. But the next wave is something else. It's digital disrupting digital. It's where ecosystems are merging into other ecosystems. It's where constant new digital ecosystems of different brands and companies pop up and start interacting with other ecosystems, and hence everything is in constant transformation, everything is in constant change. And to ride this wave, adaptability or adaptive strategies is key and core to make sure that you don't go static. Those 5 currents of disruption look a little like this. First of all, boundaries are breaking down. Companies are sort of based on silos historically. Silos that may partner up with other companies and brands and products. And in the future, since most of these things become digital, these silos will break down. And we will never know exactly what brand we're actually interacting with when we're talking to Siri or Alexa, or seeing something that is personalized for me on my Facebook stream or stuff like that. So boundaries are breaking down. The customer journeys as we know them, how many of you have heard the word customer journeys before in your personal life? Yeah. We usually just know that we can see like a map. This is where we'll meet the customer here, here, here. Then they'll call in, and then we'll send them an email and all these things. In the future, that's going to explode. These customers, poor customers, are not even going to know what companies they are actually interacting with when they're interacting with the digital systems. And that is a massive opportunity. But it's also a little more difficult to work with. It's not linear, and it's very unpredictable how you're going to meet and where you're going to meet customers and users. So designing for continual adaptation will be a key differentiator of success for almost all brands in the future. Boundaries are breaking down. Trust, this is super interesting. Trust is changing. Faith in governments, in big business and impressed, stuff that we always trusted, we don't really trust that anymore. That trust is deteriorating really fast. We also used to trust the first bigger heroes in digital transformation. We don't do that anymore. However, distributed networks and marketplaces, blockchain and the decentralized web is something that is growing fast and something that people tend to put their trust in a different way than they've done before, and they certainly don't do it in the old trusted institution as they did before. So we need to work with designing stuff that resonates with the constantly evolving values that people have, and most importantly, the demand there is for accountability, for transparency, and for an ethical approach to, say, privacy and all other things that are important for us. If you have any questions, please pop them. So trust is changing. Smarter with extended reality is also a current that we find to be very important. You might think, so what is VR, virtual reality, and AR, augmented reality? How important is that to us? That's what we usually think of when we talk about the new realities or the new extended realities. But AI, as Christian was talking about, of course, is a very important part of future understanding of what reality is. AI is what is going to change our interactions with systems and structures from being, let me move forward to the next one, because those things are very connected, from being just relevant to being meaningful. So because of the profiling there is of everybody and who we are when we move around in the digital realm, relevance has increased. When I look at my Facebook stream, just to be super practical, there's nothing that's not relevant. It's all super interesting. The way that I'm being targeted is relevant. It's all super interesting. But because everything is relevant, everything is something that is targeted and tailor-made for me, in whatever interaction I have with any digital systems, nothing really is relevant anymore. I have a relevance overload problem. So how do we handle that? We work with meaningfulness instead. And AI is probably the core driver of that. AI can help systems that interact with other systems make sure that I don't get 100,000 pings every day of something that is driven on a lot of data that people have about me, or companies have about me, but it zooms into some kind of interactions that will be meaningful and changing for my life and will make my life and every day easier. So meaningful versus relevance is going to be a big battlefield also going forward. It's imperative to design for that when you are working with all the interactions I'm sure you guys have with your suppliers, or customers also. And of course, sustainability. And depending on where you're from, if you're from Europe or if you're from the US, you will probably look at this in a different way right now. In Europe, I believe that everybody will agree with me when we're saying that if you do not design your solutions, anything that you do out of your company, of your organization, to be something that can sort of position yourself better in terms of sustainability when it comes to the bigger agendas, obviously environment, all health-related consequence of products and services that we work with, you will be under a tremendous pressure within the next 5 years. It's probably not the same in the US yet, but it will be very fast. Being aware of your sustainability responsibilities as a company will be good business in the future because clients will turn their back on you if you do not have a very strong position on this. So it's becoming a commercial imperative. Business models will break down from where they are right now and become more sort of a circular economy-oriented, ecosystem-centered, as it says here. And it is probably going to go a lot faster than we think. It's already being seen everywhere around, of course. So, to wrap it all up, the constant change currents, if you want to work and understand with constant change, these 5 currents are pretty important. Boundaries are breaking down. Companies are no longer silos. They will have to interact with other companies, other services in a whole different way than ever seen before. Trust is changing, mainly also because of that, because of all these interactions. It's going to be more and more difficult to understand who am I actually talking to, who am I interacting with, who gets all my data. All these things will need to be addressed also in most of the solutions that we all work with. Extended reality, AI, can probably help us with creating solutions, interactions that are meaningful, helpful, and not just relevant for me, because there's enough relevance out there. There's actually nothing else than relevance out there anymore. And then, of course, sustainability. The world is our home, and we need to pay due respect to it with all the systems that we are interacting with and also creating. And that's it for now. Is that? Do you guys have any questions? I see that I still have a few minutes left, but we may also be a little ahead of schedule or what?
So, David, can I start actually? Sorry, I have a microphone, so it's easy. I know you work on it. I know you also can talk about a lot of the projects you work on, but you are in the middle of this change right now with a lot of your customers. I know you work a lot in China.
Yeah.
I know you work with electrical vehicles.
Yes.
This perception that China is far behind on design and all of these things, where do you see that is going? Because I think that's like, we used to think, oh, China was behind on manufacturing and suddenly they had better quality than we have in the West. And it was like, at least they're behind on design, but...
No, not at all.
So you see that as coming up really fast, right?
Oh, totally. That's again, everything is changing really fast, and also not only our perception of China, but the realities in China in terms of creativity, innovation, technological advancement, of course, etc., is something that has put completely to shame over the last 10 years. There's absolutely... China is by no means... You used to say that China can only copy, but that is never true. That was never true. It wasn't true back then. There was a lot of conditions like 10 or 20 years ago that sort of made that be that way. But obviously the base of talent in China is fantastic, and that has just evolved over the last 10 years. There are awesome innovation and design agencies, etc., in China, and the businesses out there are more innovative. And actually also, when it comes to sustainability, very much aware of where the world is going right now.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to sort of add to that question, then, I think most of us in the room and most of our customers, they have supply chains set up for how to deliver from China to the West, to the world. Mm-hmm. But China is now the second largest consumer market. It's about to be the largest consumer market in the world. Do you see customers who also talk to you guys about that? Are you seeing Western brands that are thinking about coming the other way and what that means from, also designing for Chinese consumers?
Totally. Yeah. Designing for Chinese customers, like whether, obviously, so within fashion, of course, that would make you understand, but also within products and the way that products interact with each other, you have to look at what happens in China right now. And you have to look at what happens in China with everything right now. My girlfriend is Chinese, so I'm not allowed in China, so now you know. And the sort of payment systems, the entire integrated smart thinking in China is something that will blow you away if you're there. It's also, there's a lot of things you have to be concerned about with it, but it works and it's super efficient, and they are way ahead of, say, Germany, where I'm also spending a lot of time, which is because of actually trust issues with all these systems, are now way behind what happens in China. Right. In China, you don't see cash. In Germany, literally, you don't see cash anymore in restaurants, etc. In Germany, you always pay with cash. Germans, they don't want people to be able to track where they spend their money, while in China, you cannot do anything else. And that platform creates some massive opportunities for innovation.
All right, Dave, thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.